Okay, I think I've got that. As he said, I am Paulette B. from Kingsport, Tennessee, and you can tell I'm a Southern girl when I open my mouth. There's no question about that. I see some people on here that I know and love, so that always makes you feel good. This is my time to say what I was like, what happened, and what I'm like now. I'm sorry to say, if you tuned in tonight and thought you might hear something really spectacular, you might want to just go get a snack or something and just take an hour off, because my drunk log and my whole story, I guess, is pretty boring to everybody but me. It was life-changing for me. I was born right here in East Tennessee in 1945. That makes me 78. So you don't have to figure the math. I've been sober a little over 13 years. People think I've probably been in the program a long time, but took me a while to get here, which you'll hear. I started out, before I was even born, I like to say, with an alcoholic attitude. My mother had me in the elevator on the way to the maternity ward. It was called a lightning birth, and I think she had one pain and lots of damage, and I popped out. She couldn't have any more children, so she was stuck with just me, poor thing. But I like to say that was sort of from day one. I was ego, all about me first, railroading my way through life. I was raised out in the country close to two grandmothers that adored me, and a mom and dad that I attended their wedding, by the way, but I always felt loved and I always felt wanted. My dad worked an 8 to 5 job at Eastman Kodak Company, but he was a rock and roll musician on the weekends and taught guitar lessons. And so I had a steady stream of guys in the neighborhood that came for guitar lessons, and I like to think they were coming to flirt with me, but I doubt that was the case. But I did have a little bit of an unusual upbringing in the fact that my mom and dad were overprotective and took me with them everywhere they went. So I went to dances and saw most of the rock and roll stars back in those days, because my dad was the backup, the band for them, or the cover band. And so that was a little unique, but it really I didn't have any, well, I was too young, really, almost, and I was right with my mom and dad the whole time. But I never saw drinking, I just saw it as a grown-up thing that everybody did. And then I was introduced with, my dad had some uncles that were heavy drinkers if they weren't alcoholics, and they would drop by to hear music at our house. And I just always was so judgmental about their loudness and their, what I call stupidity, when they come drunk. And sometimes mother would give dad the look, and he knew it was time to try to get him to move on. But you know, had a pretty normal childhood, really. When I got in school, I found school to be boring. Grades came real easy for me, so it was just mostly just bored and feeling out of place, like we hear from other people's stories. I was right. I really identified that with that right from the first, how out of sorts I felt with everybody else. It was either I was smarter or they were smarter. It was never just we're all humans, we're all the same. I always was comparing. I wouldn't do any sport or anything that I couldn't do better than everybody else. If I couldn't do it better than everybody else, I just would stay away from it altogether. It was just such a ego thing with me, and insecurity, I found out. But that was my growing up. I finally snuck out and got a boyfriend at 15. And my mom and dad let me stay the night with a friend a few times. So one of these times, right after we started sneaking around and seeing each other, he was 4 years older than me, or 3 years at that time, and I thought I was madly in love. Of course, with the first boyfriend. The first time we made love, I got pregnant the very first time, before I even hardly knew how all that worked and how all that happened, which was a shock. And back in those days, you got married or was sent away. You could not stay in school, and you were pretty much shamed, and life as you knew it was over. So I thought I loved this guy. We were just going to be grown-ups with the blink of an eye. So we got married. We stayed married about 7 months out on our own in an apartment. In that 7 months, I saw a new side of him. I found out everybody didn't live in like my parents lived, in a loving situation. He was from a long line of wife beaters and raging temper. So I got 2 or 3 episodes of that, and I saw I had really made a big mistake. He couldn't find work, so he joined the service. And the minute he went off to boot camp, I went back to mom and dad, begging to come home. And of course, they said yes. I couldn't get back in school for a whole year, and I had to go to the board of school directors and everything to just even be able to do that. But I did get back in high school, ended up graduating with my class because I skipped a year I made up the year I lost. But mom and dad was super helpful with my son. They loved him, and it was just a blessing, really, for all of us. I grew up with him. I like to say I enjoyed him so much more than my second son, because I really enjoyed playing with him and going to the park and doing all those things. It wasn't just an obligation because you're the mother and that's what you should do. But anyway, I got through school. After my marriage, I was 17 by the time I divorced, or the divorce was final. And the minute I got out of high school, I got a job with Eastman Kodak, and worked there, and lived at home with mom and dad. They took care of Scott while I worked, and life went on. One thing about the early pregnancy and the marriage at 15, it probably kept me out of drinking and drugging at school, because I was determined I was not going to have anything to do with men ever again. And I did that all through high school and my first year or so of my work career. But at age 20, I met husband number 2. And of course, with my alcoholic thinking, I went to the other end of the scale. I wasn't going to go with anybody that showed any kind of rage or anger or much emotions at all. So I married somebody that was a great guy, a good guy, a friend, but I wasn't in love with him. I don't think he was in love with me either. It was a convenience marriage. He was on his way to Vietnam, but once he was married and was in the process of adopting my 4-year-old son at that point, he didn't have to go in the service. That marriage lasted 13 years. Wasn't really a marriage. He worked nights, I worked days. We did have my second son, and we didn't have any big arguments. I was dying of boredom and thinking, is this all there is to life? We went to church. We did all the things that a happy married couple with children should be doing. We helped with the youth group and the scouts, but it was all just superficial. I didn't get a connection with the Methodist Church, even though I was very active with it through our whole marriage. But I just got more and more irritable and discontent. I didn't take my first drink until I was 25, by the way, because I was, like I say, I don't see any grays. I still have a problem with that. It's either black or white. I make up my mind, I agree with this or I don't agree with this. And so I was not going to drink. I was not going to fall into getting pregnant again until I wanted to. And we wanted this second boy. And so now we had 2 sons, and I thought that would fix everything, but it didn't. I just got more and more discontent, and I couldn't figure why, because I should be happy, but I was not. I wasn't happy with my job. I wasn't happy with anything. And I felt like all these outside things ought to make me happy. And I think I really wanted this second husband to make me happy some way. Well, that just couldn't happen. But anyway, 13 years into that marriage, I met a fellow at work that became my third husband. And he was my forever husband. We've been married 44 and a half years. And, but there's a little catch to that. We found each other while we were still married to 2 other people. It wasn't good marriages. And I think they were ready for it to end too, but we didn't do it the way we should have done it. And there was a lot of deceit and a lot of things I felt guilty about over that, and he did too. But he brought 2 daughters with him to the marriage. And so all of a sudden we were like the Brady Bunch. We got rid of the ex-wife and ex-husband. We married and was planning on living happily ever after, although all our friends and all our relatives were dead set against this marriage, which I can look back and see why, but we were in lust, and thank goodness that turned into love. But we just rocked on, normal house full of kids and pets and a bird and a lizard and just all those things. My husband decided to go back to night school and get a master's degree, and I just was keeping the kids going and doing all the sports and all that. And he also got into triathloning and biking and all kinds of racing, which took us all over the country to compete in that stuff. And we'd camp and drag the kids with us. And then we would go all over the country with their sports events. We just stayed busy, busy, busy. And I've found since then, when you don't want to face yourself and don't want to slow down enough to really have to see what's going on in your head. Just having lots of responsibilities did that for me. Now I drank some along with this, but not to the point that it took over my life. And I always had kids, and in the back of my mind, for some reason, there was just this horror. If something happened to one of them and I had to take them to the hospital and I was drunk, what would I do? You know, it's just crazy things. But anyway, that went on. He finished his degree. The kids got through middle school and up in high school and out of high school and into college, and things were going good. I still was just miserable with my job. I just felt so unfulfilled doing the same thing in big business. And I think it was the empty nest syndrome too, when the kids didn't have to have me do for them and think for them. I didn't know what to do with myself. So I had a friend in real estate just begged me to get my real estate license. And so I did. And I thought, well, I'll just sell a few houses or maybe buy something and fix it up ourselves, and that'd be our retirement plan. Well, the minute I got into real estate, I fell in love with it. It was just me. And it was so different from the jobs I'd had before. And I stayed at Eastman 3 more years, retired after 30 years of service with them. But I'd been in real estate for 3 years too. And I was doing better in real estate than I'd done after 30 years of business with Kodak. But I did leave with their insurance and that, so that worked good until it didn't. But my real estate career just took off. And with that, it filled this oversized ego I had that I didn't realize I had, because I was sort of in the background supporting my husband and supporting our kids. And it was like I got this little bit of fame and fortune with being the top dog in my real estate company. And I let it go to my head. And I was doing so well that my husband quit his job at Eastman to help me. And we bought a real estate franchise and ended up opening over the next few years really fast. We opened 4 offices and had 70 some agents, and I thought I had arrived. My God was money and power and prestige and ego, and it sort of put that getting pregnant at 15 on the back burner and made me feel okay. But all that outside stuff we know don't bring happiness, and it didn't, but I sure tried it for a while and thought it would. And I don't know if any of you are realtors or know much about that life, but it's lots of drinking and lots of entertaining and lots of partying. And we did our share of that. And I always, when I didn't have the responsibility of the kids, I always missed the mark and overdrank. But I thought everybody did. I thought that's why you drank, is to get high as fast as you can. Didn't really like the taste of it that well. I learned to, but I just thought that was the whole purpose. And I thought everybody around me was drinking like I was, but they were not. I found out when I did my 5th step that I needed to apologize with every restaurant owner and worker in the whole town I lived in, because I had thrown up and left a mess and been horrible at every time I went out to eat and overdrank. And it just spiraled out of control. And the more money we made, the more we spent, and the more we let that take over our life. And then we just, my husband drank right along with me, but he could stop, and he would stop, and he would make little hints to me, do you have to drink so fast? Do you have to drink so much? Why don't you just not drink tonight? I just let that roll. I thought he was jealous because I could outdrink him. And I liked being able to drink with the guys and know that I was, I didn't care a thing about drinking with the wives because they were nice. They didn't belly up to the bar like I did. But soon, tragedy hit our family. I have a 19-year-old granddaughter that I was very, very close to, our first grandchild. And she stayed with us for 2 years while her mother was in Desert Storm. And my son was a truck driver, so we basically filled in for her parents when she was 5 and 6. But she was going back to UT. She was in college down there, been home for spring break visiting all of us, and one car accident and killed her instantly. And I was just not prepared for that. No God in my life. In fact, I was atheist and had very little respect for my involvement with religion. It just didn't work for me, and I didn't think it should work for anybody. I was obnoxious about that. But I took that very hard, and the only tool I had in my toolbox was the drink. And so it escalated, and it went from not wanting to go out. I was still working. I could hold myself together. I loved my work, so I could do that. But the minute I was off duty, or I had a cancellation of an appointment, or by 5:30, I was home drinking. And so that was pretty fast, became an every night thing. And then when my husband would get home, I would have a glass of wine with him. He would know what I'd had before. And I don't know why he never seemed to pick up how I could get that drunk on 2 or 3 glasses of wine. But I had anything I could get down before he got home. And I wasn't particular about what I drank. I was drinking for the effect, not at all the taste of it, or not to be sociable. It had passed that. This was purely medication. That went on for some time. Right at that same time, probably 9 months later, we were in the middle of building a whole new company. We bought and mortgaged everything we had to build this new real estate office for all these agents that wanted a gym in their office. And it's just something to brag about. And it meant nothing after Joe Beth died. And then real estate tanked. About 4 months after we had the ribbon cutting and opened the doors to the new, beautiful real estate company, nothing was selling. We went from, over the next year, we went from 72 agents down to 8, and closed 2 offices, was able to sell another one, but we had 8,000 square feet for 8 agents and a big, all kinds of expenses that went with that, and had a $70,000 bill to pay to the local newspaper for a contract that was supposed to be shared with all these agents. But we knuckled down. That work ethic come in handy. My husband and I both just worked and made it through that. it wasn't, for 4 years, we didn't really make any money. We just paid our bills every month. And I think that's a God thing. You know, when you just sort of give up and try to just do the next thing that comes up, it seems to work. But right when we were getting out of this dilemma we were in financially and almost having to go bankrupt, and we had a couple of things come together that we sold some commercial property when nothing was selling, and we just were able to pull out from under that. But we learned a valuable lesson, and it's probably the best thing that could have ever happened, because it brought us back down to being a little more right-sized, and saying we would never overspend and do the crazy things we did with the money. We would take it serious every closing we had from here on out. And we were doing that, and things were smoothing out. And then my son, my oldest son, the day after Christmas, killed himself. It was his daughter that died in the car wreck. And he just could not deal with it. Plus, we found out later, was drinking way more than any of us knew. We just thought he just couldn't stand being around the rest of the grandkids and everything with her gone. And he had threatened suicide a few times before, but he did it the day after Christmas, and it was just it was a whole different thing. The thing that made his death different is that I had, in the meantime, got into AA and the program of Al-Anon. I'm a double winner. I do both 12-step programs. I feel like I need both of them, and it takes both of them to keep me even remotely sane. But having a sponsor and having the strength of AA when I lost my son made it so much different. And I had a spiritual connection at that point. Now, how I got to that was what got me to AA with all this. Go back, I was still drinking at home all the time, but I had met my mother and my mother-in-law at 3:30 in the afternoon at a local bar that they went to once a week for a happy hour at 3:30. But I joined them, and they said I drank 6 or 8, 2 for the price of ones, in about 45 minutes, and then got in the car and left. I blacked out. Didn't remember going home. Didn't remember I was supposed to be going to pick up my dogs. I was supposed to be coming by our real estate office and pick up a rent check, $500 cash that the manager didn't want to be responsible for overnight. So I did make it to the office. I did get the 500, but I didn't get home with it. So I, to this day, don't know where that went. I don't know. When I woke up the next morning, I passed out. I was passed out when my husband got home, but he had sort of gotten used to that. But my mother and my mother-in-law had called him concerned about me. They tried to get me not to drive, but you know how we are about that. I don't know where I went. I don't know what I did, but I didn't wreck the car. I did look out to see if that was the case, but it scared me. It put the fear of how serious my drinking had gotten. And I was spiraling down so fast, I just knew I had to do something. There again, see, I didn't know anything about AA, hadn't talked to anybody about this. What I had been spending all this time that we were in this financial downturn and I had lost my granddaughter, I had just obsessed and fixated on my 3 children that I was just convinced were drugging and drinking, were going to end up in jail, were going to kill themselves. And really, what I was a lot of my concern was, how would it look on me if they got arrested? How would it look if they got a drunk driving? It was all still about this, what's people going to say and think. So I was just driving myself, my husband, and everybody around me crazy over every sober moment I had. I was worried and talking over and over, what are we going to do about this problem with the kids? We've got to get them straightened out. And, I don't think it was as serious as I made it out to be. It just kept me from focusing on myself. But anyway, after that, we were going to our home in Hilton Head for a week, and I told my husband on the way down that I felt like I had a serious drinking problem, more than he realized, and that I was going to stay in Hilton Head and just try to see if I could quit drinking. And I wanted him to come home and leave me down there. My plan was to just get some food in, lock myself in the house, and not drink. And didn't have a clue that I could have died. That's serious. But I didn't drink anything on the way down, didn't drink while he was still there. And then I didn't drink 2 days that I was there by myself. It was tough, but I just was still just scared. I was just fear-driven to knowing something had to change. And on the 3rd night, at 3 o'clock in the morning, I found myself on my knees in the floor saying, "Help me," to a God that I didn't believe in, didn't know would work. And I immediately felt a calmness, a peace that I'd never felt before. I didn't know what had happened at the time, and I didn't put a whole lot of stock that I connected that with a prayer, because it really wasn't a prayer as I would have thought a prayer was supposed to be. It was just help. The next morning, I slept good. I got back in bed, went to sleep, woke up the next morning, and see, I still wasn't thinking AA. I thought, I'm going to see if there's one of those Al-Anon meetings, because I'd heard about that from a friend of mine. And so I found an address, didn't know a time or anything, and I went to, in Hilton Head, it's called Yana Club. It's a clubhouse that has 4 or 5 meetings or more a day. Al-Anon meets there, AA, NA, and probably some other things. But I went, and the Al-Anon meeting was starting in 5 minutes. They said, "Come on in." I didn't even hardly know what I was going into. I just thought they were going to give me a list to tell me how to fix my kids that had got offline and get them straightened out, and if I followed these steps and said what they said to say, all this would be behind us. And they didn't give me the list. In fact, I just heard a lot of things that were in direct conflict with what I had been doing and how I had been treating my kids, trying to live their life for them and just shaming them and begging them and being angry with them. It's no wonder they wouldn't answer the phone when I would call or try to avoid me as much as they could. Plus, everybody knew I was drinking too much too. But anyway, I did get some relief from that. I did hear some things that I thought maybe was a possibility of I ought to consider maybe doing something different. See, I'd spent my whole life thinking my way was right about everything. And I'd spent my whole life blaming other people for anything that went wrong, or it never was my fault, never taking responsibility for anything. But I sat in those Al-Anon meetings and I got my schedule and went around to the different churches that they were in and just didn't drink. But I hadn't even really convinced myself I wasn't going to drink forever, not drink. But I wasn't going to drink for a while anyway. And I wanted to have a clear mind to not be shaken and hear what these Al-Anon folks had to say. So at the 5th meeting I went to, this girl that had been at 2 or 3 of the meetings, I recognized her. She came and sit by me, and she said, introduced herself, and she said, why don't you, if you don't have anything to do right after this meeting, there's another meeting across the hall, and I'm in it too, and I would love you to join me. You might hear something you liked. And never, said it was AA or she thought I was an alcoholic or any of that. But I went over and it was a speaker meeting. And for the first time, I just felt at home. I didn't know any of these people, but the person that shared, I can't really tell you a word he said, but everything he said I related to. And I could not believe the honesty I felt was coming from him, and the friendship, and the people just made me feel welcome, and I felt welcome inside. So I kept coming back. I just immersed myself in every meeting I could get in, and what happened when I had to come home to Tennessee, back to where everybody knew me, everybody knew my face. I drove cars that had Remax results all over them and my name. There was yard signs all over every neighborhood with my picture on it for sale signs. So I thought, how am I going to be anonymous in this small little Tennessee town with my face has been plastered everywhere for 15 or 20 years. And at first I thought, I'm just not going to be able to go. I'm just going to have to go when we're in South Carolina. And then I just thought, I want what these people have. I don't want to give up the way I'm feeling. And I know there's more. So I drove around the block 4 times before I got the nerve to go into a meeting. And I just decided that, so what? I want to be at peace. I want to be a different person. I don't want to feel this fear and anger and all these emotions that I've had my whole life. It's just not serving me well and the people I love. So the next day I went to another meeting and Stephen was there, and he welcomed me the first thing, and everybody was very welcoming, and he gave me a Living Sober book, which I already had one and read it cover to cover, but I took it anyway. And I just gave the anonymity part out the window. I just thought, this is who I am now. And if people don't want to work with me or don't want me to represent them because they know I'm an alcoholic, that's just what will have to happen. You know, I sat in the rooms and heard great stuff for 2 whole years before I dropped that ego and that God problem. And bought into the fact that I couldn't sponsor myself. So when I finally decided I would try this sponsorship stuff, because I knew there was more that I hadn't, that I just saw a lot in people's eyes that wasn't with me yet. And I asked 3 different women to sponsor me. They all told me no, because I was obnoxious. I really was. You know, I was just full of myself still, you know, just thought I was hot stuff. And that's a God thing too. It made me, humbled me a little bit. Now, one of them did have some illnesses and just couldn't do it. But anyway, I had heard all these people tell their story in Hilton Head at the Yana Club. And over I'd hear people say that Vivian was their sponsor, and Vivian taking them through the steps had just changed their life. So I thought, maybe this Vivian will sponsor me. I'd never met her. I'd just seen her. I knew who she was. And I knew she was a beautician. I knew where her beauty shop was because we had breakfast near there a lot of times. So I wrote a note the next week. We were in Hilton Head, which was about 2 or 3 weeks from then, and slid it under her door at the beauty shop and asked her, would she sponsor me? And she called me within 10 minutes. She was there cleaning up because it was on the weekend, and called me, and she's still my sponsor today. You know, that woman changed my life. The rooms of AA was my God for 2 years. Good orderly direction, good group of drunks. That's what it stood for, to help me get through, not wanting to. I had such a problem with it, even after I had a miracle and was too stupid to realize it. I marked through the big book, and every place it said him, I would say her. And I hated, you know, the wives, what the wives were supposed to do. But anyway, AA's grown me up finally. I didn't get in here till I was 65, but it's finally helped me grow up. But I started working the steps right away with Vivian. She didn't take any bullshit from me. She made me walk the line. She would not I had every excuse in the book, procrastinated about everything, saw no reason why I should call her at 9:35 every morning. First time I didn't call was probably about the 2nd or 3rd day she had told me to. I told her, but I have a doctor's appointment. And then the next day I told her I was going to miss my meeting. She said, unless you're in the emergency room about to die, or you've already died, you call me at 9:35. And I saw I was not going to be able to bullshit my way through and get by with it. And thank goodness she had heard it all before and loved me enough to get me through the steps and let me see the miracles that are available to us through this program. I don't have any idea what time it is. Do I need to shut up? It's about time, isn't it? But anyway, AA didn't give me my life back. It gave me a life that I didn't even know existed. it turned me into a person that I'm proud of now. I can get my ego out of the way through working the steps. And the miracle came for me in making the amends, getting rid of all that guilt and that shame and that just craziness in my head of feeling less than or more than, or trying to see where I stood with everything and everybody. So I love sponsoring women. That is just my thing. I love taking the steps exactly like I was taken through them. And because that's all I know. I just know one way. And all I know is stay in the rooms and stick to it. Don't come back. Don't keep coming back. Just stay. There's no place on earth better to be than in AA. I think I'm through.
Paulette, thank you. That was a beautiful story. I'm glad we were able to hear it tonight.